Welcome. It's very nice to see everybody here. You might get a little warm because all the, the friends together, all this warmth makes us feel that way. Before we start, we're going to do our prayer and thank our spiritual friends for this afternoon being together. We thank you, spiritual friends, for this opportunity that we have this afternoon to listen to the teachings, sharing with our friend Mauricio Cisneiros, who is here from Florida, to bring the lessons and the friendship, the warmth that we all share in this doctrine. We ask for the inspiration for us to feel not only the words, but all the meaning to our lives, that we can make the bridge from the theory to the practice in our everyday lives of what we learn and what we all wanted to achieve in our lives. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for us to be searching these opportunities always. Stay with us and help us understand the lessons. So be it. So we would like to welcome Mauricio, who is bringing our talk today, or mini seminar. And just so you know, let me introduce Mauricio to everyone. Mauricio was born in, you want me to say the year, 1969, in Niterói. I didn't even notice, in Rio de Janeiro, and was raised in Brasília, where he started his Spiritist education at the Spiritist group Irmão Esteban. Mauricio moved to the United States in 1988, and in 1992 he founded the Spiritist Society of Palm Beach, which he still presides today. Mauricio was also the Vice President of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and is currently the President of the United States Spiritist Council. Professionally, he has been in the undersea telecommunications field for the past 15 years and is the co-owner of an air conditioning company. And Mauricio very nicely is taking the time to come and share with us all this, the teachings, and we're very happy to have him. So I would like to welcome Mauricio for the words this afternoon on the domain of mediumship. Okay?
Hello everybody, good afternoon, good evening. It's just wonderful to be here again. I was at this center in 2010. Last time I wasn't even in this place.
Yeah.
So thank you again for inviting me. It's just fun. I have great friends here. Today we're going to talk about this book, which is not an introductory book of mediumship. It's not an introduction to Spiritism. This is a book that goes more in depth as far as spirituality goes, mediumship goes. And two things we're going to really concentrate in this talk, because the book talks about many aspects of spirituality and mediumship. Two things we're going to concentrate on that are, one, to remind ourselves that we are spiritual beings, incarnated, and that spiritual beings who are discarnated are constantly living here with us, among us. Spiritual beings who are on the other side, they're not living in a planet or some other place that is 1 billion years away from Earth. They are living in the spiritual world, which is everywhere. This here, this physical world that we see now and that we can touch, matter, all of this matter, this is just a copy of the real world, which is the spiritual world. So, thing number one, topic number one, they are constantly among us. When we go to the other side, we're not going to a place that is 300 billion light years from where we are now. We're going to be on the other side, right here. Close to people that we love, close to people that we care about, and unfortunately, close to people that we don't like, and sometimes even closer to people that we hate, because love is not the only thing that unites people. Hate also unites people, unfortunately. Second thing, besides remembering that spirits are always living among us, is that everything that takes place, physically speaking, materialistically speaking, takes place because of the power of the mind, of the power of our thoughts. And what is the mind and our thoughts? What is it? It is us. Because that's what the spirit is. The spirit is the mind. The spirit is thought. I don't have a spirit within me. I am the spirit. I don't have a mind within me. I am the mind. When we die, which that word shouldn't really exist, when we pass on to the other side, when our physical bodies quit working, what is left? Just the mind, just the thought, just the spirit. And this mind, when it's incarnated here in a physical body, is what creates everything that we see. We create cars, we create airplanes, chairs, we create these things. When we are on the other side, our mind continues to create, does the exact movement of planets, of galaxies, of all of these chemical compounds that we know about, and they're different, and they form other things when we mix them up. All of these things are manipulated by the spiritual mind. The higher in elevation in spiritual progress the spirit is, the more he can manipulate matter. So, with that in mind, we begin talking about this wonderful book. André Luiz has several books. This is one that dedicates to the subject of mediumship. In this book, and we're going to go, of course, we're not going to talk about everything the book talks about, but the main persons in the book, the main characters of the book, and these are not just characters, they are real individuals, spiritual beings. André Luiz was a medical doctor while alive. He entered the spiritual colony Nosso Lar. Who hasn't watched the movie Nosso Lar here? Please raise your hands. Who has not watched it? Okay, we have to show it again at the center, because there's people who haven't watched it. And it's very important for you to watch it and especially read the book, or study the book, because we like saying study the books, don't read them. Okay? So, he entered the spiritual calling of Nosso Lar after a period of 8 years in the lower zones. There he started to learn about the spiritual world and became an active part in the works of enlightening the humanity on earth as to the reality of spirit life. So basically, he was somebody like us who discarnated, passed on, was amazed about the things he encountered because he had forgotten about them, and he began writing about them in detail. So, André Luiz. Aulus had been interested in mediumistic experiments since 1779, when he met Mesmer in Paris, when he conducted research that would result in the renowned proposals he introduced. He also witnessed the accomplishments of Allan Kardec in codifying Spiritism. So Aulus not only studied or was interested in magnetism, which is what Mesmer studied and preached and worked with, but he also worked or was close to Allan Kardec when Spiritism came about. Hilario is a student in the spiritual world like André Luiz. So Aulus basically is the individual who is guiding throughout this book. He's going to be guiding André Luiz and Hilario in explaining the things they are presencing regarding mediumship and spirituality, right? So the book begins in a meeting in the other side, in the spiritual world, where this one individual, Alberio, a spiritual guide, benefactor, is doing a talk. In this illustration here, we see a whole bunch of people sitting. They're all spirits sitting and watching Alberio talk. Some of them, as we see the golden strings up there, are incarnated spirits who, either through mediumship or either through sleeping, they are visiting this place, this spiritual place, and watching this speech. When we sleep, we go to, where do we go when we sleep? The spirit is, and we are, where our heart is. Who told us that? Anybody remembers? We are where our heart is. Anybody remembers? Jesus told us that. Exactly. So, when we sleep, we go to where our heart is. These individuals who have their heart in the notion that it's important for them to be educated spiritually, go to these places. Some go to places they help other people. Some go to places they can learn more. And they are connected still to the physical body, to this golden string. So some of them there are incarnated, but watching that talk. In that talk, and it's a 2-page long talk in the beginning of the book, a wonderful, wonderful speech given by Alberio. I took one phrase from those 2 pages. Mediumship in itself is not enough. It is essential to know what type of mental wavelength we are assimilating to, so that we can recognize the quality of our work and evaluate the direction taken. I thought this phrase was really wonderful because a lot of people talk about mediumship, which is this wonderful phenomena, but all they think about is, I can talk to spirits, I can see spirits, I can talk to friends of mine or family members who have discarnated. So all people think about is the phenomena. But in order for this phenomena to be a productive one, to be a good one, to be according to the divine laws, which they are simply described to us in the Spirit's book. We can look for the part in the Spirit's book that talks about divine laws, and it's divided up by in 11 different topics, 11 different divine laws. So, in order for mediumship to follow, to be within these laws, which are basically talking about love between one another, respect between one another, and so on and so forth, we have to remember that we as mediums or as participants of a mediumistic meeting have to be in a good mental wavelength. We have to be in affinity with spiritual guides. What exactly is to be in affinity with spiritual guides? Will spiritual guides spend their time telling us if we're going to win the lottery? Will they spend, or should I say waste their times telling us whether we're going to get married or not, whether we're going to get a good job or not, whether we're going to move to a place we want to move or not? Absolutely not. Spiritual guides working by giving everyone a general idea of good things to be accomplished in life. When you pick a wonderful mentor, the mentor that is the greatest spirit who has ever stepped on earth, which was Jesus, as per the Spirit's book, the greatest and the most enlightened spirit who has ever stepped on earth. That's how it's written in the Spirit's book. Jesus. Jesus gave everyone a general education, a general idea of what they should do. He wouldn't go around telling everybody you should do this, you should do that, you should move here, you should marry this one, or marry that one, or quit your job, and so on and so forth. So that is not what healthy mediumship is all about. Absolutely not. So this mental wavelength means for us to be in affinity with spiritual guides. Because there's a lot of mediums out there who are talking about all these things, who are telling people what they should do and what they should not do, but they are not in affinity, they're not working with good spirits. They are working with spirits who want something in exchange. They want to control people's lives, they want to control the medium's lives. And when we go to these meetings and when we are in contact with these spirits, what happens is we become addicted to it, to a point where we can't take any decisions in life on our own. We have to go to the medium and ask him, and usually pay him, which, by the way, mediumship is not to be charged. I cannot and I should not be a medium and live off mediumship, because it is a sacred faculty that is given to us. So we become addicted to going to these meetings and talking to these spirits, when all the information we need to guide our lives, it's already out there. It's in many different books. It is within all the books of the Spiritist doctrine. So a serious individual and medium will do the most that he can so his mental or her mental wavelength is in affinity with the ones of spiritual guides. That is basically what Alberio was trying to teach these individuals in this talk, all throughout the 2 pages. So we have mediumistic or mediumship groups in the Spiritist centers. In other places too, other churches, other doctrines, other religions, call them different things. But you see mediumship everywhere. This here right now is a mediumistic meeting. Not in the sense where we're going to channel spirits, but they're present and they're helping us and they're watching. So wherever spirits are present, there's mediumship going on. We can sense them through intuition. They can also sense us, because they're not the only ones who influence us in our lives. We also influence them with our thoughts and our actions. So, in Spiritism, we have these mediumistic groups which are made up, supposedly and supposed to be made up, by people who study mediumship, people who are somewhat educated in the subject. In a Spiritist center, we cannot walk in and say, I want to participate in a mediumistic group, because we need to be educated to do so. And even if we have participated in other groups, and we're going to see this a lot here, each different group has its own fluidic, mental constitution, spiritual constitution. So we come into a new Spiritist group. In order for us to participate in the mediumship group, we are supposed to first get to know the people around us, the people who participate in that group. We spend time, we spend months, we participate in the meetings, we start helping out in the group, we start to participate in the activities of the group, making friends, getting to know each other. So we are, what that first slide talked about, in the same wavelength of the people who already participate in the mediumistic group. Because there's nothing else more important in a mediumship group than us who participate in that group being friends, being fraternal to one another, being respectful to one another. Because we're going to channel spirits, and most of them are going to be there so we can help them because they're suffering, because they're discarnated and they still hate people, or they have traumas from however they discarnated, or because they are really unsatisfied because they didn't do what they were supposed to do in a past incarnation. So they are suffering and they are in need of help. When we channel these spirits in the mediumship group, how are we going to help them if we don't really like the person that is sitting right next to us? I'm having problems with this individual, that individual. How can we help them? How can we be in the same wavelength, mental wavelengths, as spiritual guides? We can't. So that is the first objective of people who want to participate in a mediumistic group. To be friends, to be fraternal with one another, to be respectful with one another. Right? So, André Luiz, Aulus and Hilário, Aulus takes André Luiz and Hilário to this Spiritist center where a serious Spiritist meeting is taking place. Because there's a lot of mediumship meetings out there taking place that are not serious. Because they're made up of people who are not serious. They're made up of people who haven't studied, people who are not worried about anything else regarding their moral life, their spiritual life. All they care about is to go to the mediumship meeting to talk to spirits. So these are not serious individuals. They're just curious individuals. So in this Spiritist group, a serious Spiritist group, Aulus takes André Luiz and Hilário to observe what a serious mediumistic meeting is. So when they get there, the first thing Aulus, the mentor, does is to ask for permission from the spiritual mentor who is the coordinator of that Spiritist center. Because every Spiritist center, every church, every synagogue, every temple of any religion, whatever the religion is, has spirits who are in charge of that work. Spirits are not only dedicated to Spiritism, right? Because Spiritism is a very young religion, science, philosophy. It's only 150 so years old. So every religion has spirits who are in charge of them and are working towards them, right? So in this Spiritist group, when Aulus gets there, he asks for permission so they can observe the meeting that is taking place. And the mentor who is in charge of this meeting, of this group, allows them to stay there and observe the meeting. The first thing they see, and the book explains, is that the Spiritist center, or the place where these meetings take place, it's not only circumscribed to these four walls that we see here. It's not only as big as this physical location that we are in right now. Because spirits are, like we said before, thought. They're the mind, they're the thinking being. So wherever they are, they can be connected by thought and by thinking. If a spirit is to be helped and he's not present where we are present, they will be helped because thought travels. There's no distance that will keep thought anywhere. The more enlightened thought is, and the more enlightened our actions are, and the more enlightened our objective is and our wishes are, the further away and the fastest thought goes to. And Leon Denis has a wonderful, wonderful book. It's a tiny book. It's only about 100 pages long. And it talks about the irradiating mentalizations that spirits have. And that book explains how far thoughts of spirits that are very enlightened travels through space. So, in this place, they begin seeing a lot of spirits who are present in that location, and a lot of spirits who are present somewhere else and also being helped because of the energies that are being produced in that place. How are the energies produced in a place, in a group, within a team? How is that produced? Produced according to the thoughts of the individuals who participate in that group. So if we have a mediumistic group composed of 10 people, and 5 people in that group have not prepared themselves to be there that day, if they have gone through a horrible day, a very stressful day, they haven't thought about the meeting all day, they only remember about the mediumistic meeting an hour before they have to go to the center. And then they leave their work and they go home, they take a shower, they come here, and they get here like 5 minutes late, and they're all stressed and everything. How much will they help for that meeting to be able to produce good energy, good thoughts, good spiritual fluids, so other spirits can be helped? And when we say other spirits, it's not only discarnated spirits, but it's also spirits of people who frequent the center, but are not present. People who come to the center, ask for help, receive the passes, watch the talks, and they're sitting home in need of help. They will also receive help if that mediumistic group is prepared to help. So this is what we see here. There's this whole movement going on the spiritual side of things, that materialistically we can't see, and we don't only notice if we have the capacity or we pay attention to these things. The initial prayer, a very important part of our work. This is how we connect to the spiritual guides. This is why it's important for any meeting at the center, because we're talking about the mediumship meeting, for any meeting at the spiritual center, for us to come here early. We get here 10, 15 minutes before the meeting starts. And we begin to say hi to people and talk to people. And then we sit down and we begin to think about spiritual things, because we really don't think about spiritual things when we are out there in the world. We don't really have the time, right? So when the initial prayer is done, we are capable of paying attention to what was said. Anybody remembers what Tanya said in her prayer today? Anyways, if we prepare ourselves, we are capable of doing the initial prayer, begin to connect with spiritual guides, as it is done here by the spiritual coordinator of that mediumistic meeting, who are already connecting to the incarnated coordinator of the mediumistic meeting, and the other individuals who are also prepared individuals and are also ready to be in symphony, to be in affinity with the spiritual guide that is coordinating the meeting. Have you noticed the fellowship between Clementino and Silva during the moment of prayer? Here we witness a perfect assimilation of thoughts that usually precedes mediumistic activity. So now the incarnated individuals are assimilating the wishes of their spiritual guides, their spiritual mentors. And we should do that not only in meetings at the center, but all throughout our lives. If we had the windows of our soul open to assimilating their knowledge, their wishes, we wouldn't make the mistakes that we make in life. We definitely would not. And as the meeting begins, they start talking about, Aulus presents to André Luiz and Hilário the psychoscope. By analyzing the psychoscopy of a person or a group of workers, it is possible to deduce their potential and qualify the category of their status. According to the radiation they project, we can plan the work they are capable of achieving. Everything we see on Earth, when we look at plasma TVs, when we look at CDs, DVDs, lasers, all this great stuff that we think is really wonderful technology, comes from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is the other side. Now remember, Chico Xavier literature, most of it, most of the André Luiz's book, the Spirit André Luiz's book, was written in the 60s, right? So this stuff that we're seeing here now was written way back then. And this instrument helped them analyzing each individual participant of the mediumistic group. All physical matter assumed a different appearance, emphasizing the matter of the spirit world. I saw the incarnate companions united by vast radiant circles that hovered over their heads in an opal-like splendor, like 10 small suns chained to one another. Again, he's talking about a serious mediumship group of people, right? So by analyzing the capacity of each individual participating in that group at that moment, in that day, they can then plan the meeting of that day. Because going back to what we said before, if 5 of those individuals were not prepared, the meeting would be completely different from what we're going to see here today. The mentor approached Eugenia and applied strong magnetic energy over her cerebral cortex, after projecting numerous beams of luminous rays over an extensive area of the glottis. So now, the spiritual guide, the mentor, is preparing, helping the medium, an educated medium, Eugenia, to channel a suffering spirit. Because if we are uneducated mediums, unprepared, curious mediums or individuals, and we go to these meetings, we may channel suffering spirits. But what happens when we channel a suffering spirit? We feel what the suffering spirit is feeling. So if a suffering spirit committed suicide in a past life, for example, if he or she hanged themselves, we are going to feel the same impressions that they are feeling. And that is not a good thing. That is why mediums need to educate themselves and go through many exercises so they can one day practice this type of mediumship. So the mentor is already helping Eugenia. Liborio arrived escorted by 3 spiritual guards. He did not know who was escorting him, and he was disoriented, as if he had suddenly lost his ability to see and hear. So a suffering spirit who are brought to be helped in the Spiritist, in the mediumship meeting. We saw Eugenia's spirit move away from her body and stay a few inches from it. The visitor, aided by the friends who guided him, sat close by. So there begins the communication. The spirit, the suffering spirit thoughts is now being pressed in the incarnated spirit mind. So it's mind to mind. A spiritual being does not takes our body over. When we go to certain temples and certain churches on certain Sunday sermons or meetings in certain churches, what do we see? We see at a certain part of their meetings, we see people raise and start jumping and falling on the floor and rolling on the floor. And according to these religions, that is what? That is the devil, and right. So on and so forth. They don't really believe it's just spirits. They believe it's the devil or Satan, right, taking that body. So they scream with the individual. They tell the individual to leave in the name of God and of Jesus, and so on and so forth. All that is a suffering spirit who has taken control over the body of those individuals, who are what, those individuals? Uneducated mediums. So, the reason why they take control over those bodies is because those mediums, unlike Eugenia, they don't know how to control those situations. So educated mediums learn how to channel suffering spirits without allowing suffering spirits to take control over their physical bodies, right? So the spirit can now be helped. The spirit can, under the sensation of a physical body, talk to someone else, hear someone else, and be helped. Because when these suffering spirits are on the other side, they are so mentally closed within their own thoughts and their own emotions that the spiritual guides cannot help them. They cannot get to them. They're in different wavelengths. But when the spirit is in contact with the physical body, he is now like we are. He can hear, he can feel, and so on and so forth, like an incarnated being. And he can then hear a doctrinator or a counselor talk to him or her. A few brilliant threads were connecting Eugenia's forehead, who was detached from her physical body, with the brain of the communicating spirit. So, it's a brain-to-brain thing. It's a thought-to-thought thing. Are we by chance facing a tribunal? What is this strange reception, and why am I here at such an inopportune moment? Silva stood and, under Clementino's influence, talked to Liborio, saying kindly. Now, Silva stood, the coordinator of the meeting, under Clementino's influence, talked to Liborio, saying kindly. Clementino is the mentor, the spiritual guide. My friend, let us stay calm and ask for divine guidance. So Silva, as the counselor, began talking to Liborio to try to help him. In a cloth screen measuring approximately 1 square meter, which appeared to be of sheer gauze and had distinctive controls, Liborio started seeing his elderly mother calling him to her bedside, asking for his assistance. She was about to die. Liborio responded were leaving for just a few minutes, just enough time to bring her medication, but he left the party. When we read the book, we see that this took place in Rio de Janeiro, and it was carnival time, and Liborio really wanted to go partying, and he did. But he left the party. Problem is, when he came back 2 days later, his mother was dead. So he carried that within, that trauma, all throughout his life, and he died with that trauma. Remember what we said in the beginning. When we die, when we pass on to the other side, we're not going to a different place, a crazy place, a distant place. We are going to be the same individuals that we are now. In our minds, nothing is going to change. Whoever we love, we're still going to love. Whoever we hate, we're still going to hate. Whatever traumas that we have, we're still going to carry with us. So that is why we should start bettering ourselves now, because death is not going to solve any problems, right? No problems whatsoever, as we see here. So that is why he was suffering for such a long time. And some spirits suffer for decades on the other side, suffer for hundreds of years on the other side. Like André Luiz, when we read or see Nosso Lar. For how long was André Luiz stuck in Nosso Lar in the lower zones, suffering?
8 years.
A long time to be suffering. It doesn't matter if we're a spiritual being or not. It's a long time to be suffering. Second channeling, and there's many of them, we just picked some of them. Who brought me here against my will? He bellowed. Cowards, why have you brought me here? Where are the vultures that devoured my eyes? All the fugitives and criminals shall feel the weight of my wrath. I shall kill without pity. Give me 5 whipping posts. That is what I require to regain our tranquility. So, the poor spirit reminded me of a noble man of long ago. He looked, however, as if he had come from bowels of earth. So here's an individual who was a noble man. He had many slaves in his previous reincarnation. And, of course, just like anybody who makes other people suffer when they or we discarnate, we suffer even more with those memories because they are a constant part of our minds. We cannot forget about these things anymore because we don't have the tennis games to go to anymore. We don't have the parties to go to anymore. We don't have the traveling to do anymore. All we are now is our minds. And our memories is a great percentage of what our minds are. Our memories and what we have done and what we have thought is what we are in the present. So when we discarnate, if we were in that position of that nobleman, we will suffer a lot like that nobleman, and he's been suffering for a long time because not only he's suffering, he does not want to accept why he is suffering. He does not want to examine his actions, his past actions. He still thinks he is a nobleman. The medium departed from her physical body as though yielding to a profoundly deep dream, talking with her brilliant aura that crowned her. She looked at the desperate visitor sympathetically and opened her arms to him, helping him to take possession of her now somewhat obscure physical body. I am José Maria. He issued claims and severe warnings and rebelled with exasperation, but he was restrained by Celina's control. So Celina, the other educated, prepared medium. Because if she wasn't, what he would do, it would probably be beat everybody up in that meeting. Right? He definitely would. Does that sound kind of crazy to you? Why do we think there's millions of people in jail right now or in these homes for crazy people? Because they were uncontrolled and educated mediums. How many people kill people and they don't even remember? And they don't even know why they did it. Right? Because they are uneducated and uncontrolled and mediums. Right? So here's a spirit who is a very difficult. He's not only suffering, but he's hating everybody because of the condition he put himself in. That kind of spirit in a mediumship meeting can also start talking about us, because sometimes they do know about our personal lives. Sometimes they follow us, especially because we are participants of that meeting. They follow us and they want to get to know us. So, in order for us to participate in a meeting like that, we also have to remember that we are teaching these spirits constantly throughout our lives, not only in the Spiritist Center. You see, like, all the responsibility that is with us when we participate in these kinds of things, a lot of responsibility. We can't just pretend that we're going to be these great, wonderful, respectful, and smiling individuals when we are at the Spiritist Center. Because spirits don't only exist here, they exist everywhere, and they know what we're doing. And if I'm a counselor in one of those meetings, and I tell the spirit, you should love your enemies, you should try to understand them, you should be compassionate, you should forgive, but he knows who I am. Am I at least trying to do those things? Because if I'm not, he's going to laugh on my face. And he's going to tell me, I saw you yesterday, what you did yesterday. I know there's this, and that individual that did this to you 10 years ago, but you still haven't forgiven him or her. So what are you telling me? They're just people like us. And we can't really lie to them. And we shouldn't lie to them because they know and they feel who we are. On the supervisor's approval, the guards led an evidently mentally unstable spirit into the reunion, the meeting. He suddenly crossed the safety lines that would normally prevent him from entering, frenetically shouting the young man's name. Okay, let's pay attention to this first. On the supervisor's approval, the guards led an evidently mentally unstable spirit into the reunion. Let's not forget that. Because nothing takes place in these meetings without the spiritual guide's approval. A small row of people came to seek assistance from the center. One was a young man named Pedro. His eyes were fixed on the patient. He observed nothing other than him. As he reached Pedro, our incarnate brother suddenly screamed and collapsed. So here they talk about a case where a spirit or the spirit hated Pedro because of something that happened to them in a previous life. So he was obsessing Pedro like crazy. That's why these meetings are so important. Sometimes people come to the center and they have all these problems. Spiritual problems, obsession problems, health problems. And all of these things are directly related to our mental and spiritual condition. But people walk into here and they want the Spiritist Center to solve their problems. Spiritism and the Spiritist Center cannot solve our problems at all. And a lot of people think that. The only thing the Spiritist Center and Spiritism can do is to educate us, so we can find a solution for our own problems. If we're being obsessed, we learn to pray for the obsessing spirit. And we learn to better walk in our lives within a more moral compass, so we can show to them, listen, I'm not the man I was when I did that to you. So you can forgive me, I've changed. I was wrong and I've changed. But the only thing that's going to show that to the obsessing spirit is real change in our lives. It's not just us talking, it's not just us getting passes or watching talks in the Spiritist centers or praying. No, it is our true inner modification that will end obsession completely. The only thing. So, he collapsed and began being helped. Yes, this is an epileptic seizure according to the medical definition. However, it is also a minor mediumistic trance. The two unbalanced minds are strongly united by the hatred they feel for one another. What did we say before? What unites besides love? Hate. Hate. That is what allows obsessing spirits to reach us, because they hate us, and We have created this bridge in between them and us. So in this life, if we hate anybody to the point where we cannot forgive them, every time we think about them, we feel sick about it. And we're like, I don't even want to talk to them. I don't even want to deal with them. I don't want to see them. It's important for us to start working on those feelings, because those feelings are going to keep us united. So, the spirit later on was helped and went away. Thought and mediumship. Ambrosina listened tenderly to a diverse group of patients. She had an extensive aura of opal radiations. This is a different meeting in the Spiritist Center, where some centers have it, some call it fraternal assistance meetings, where some people come and we talk to them, and then we pray for them, we pray for spiritual guides to help them, and so on and so forth. So that's that kind of meeting. And of course, there is a spiritual guides helping out, and Ambrosina was the coordinator of that meeting. As she conversed with the suffering participants, some tried to interfere with her by projecting dark substances. The sickly fluids, however, could not reach her force field. So, because a medium prepares himself or herself, they can block these very sickly fluids from reaching them. Because suffering spirits, when they come close to us, if we have this mediumship that is more an expanding and more developed mediumship, we can feel, we can sense, and we can feel sick if we're not prepared. And a lot of people feel sick about things they don't even know what they are, and all it is spiritual influence. That's all it is. But the more we develop ourselves and educate ourselves, we can more block these energies. And that's exactly what she was able to do here in this meeting. Numerous sheets of paper containing emotional petitions from the people who sought the solutions for their afflictions were placed next to Ambrosina as she held herself in deep prayer, and to other people helping her in prayer. Prior to responding to the question, the spiritual workers of the institution placed a fluid screen close to Ambrosina, where the scenes of an ill and anguished people mentioned in the evening's petitions appeared in it. So, in one of those petitions, somebody was asking for someone else to be helped, a friend of theirs, a family member to be helped. And that family member was really sick. He was somewhere else, not present, he couldn't be present, and he was really sick. So the spiritual guides materialized the screen, made the screen appear, so they could monitor that patient's condition. And as the text explains, with that monitoring, they end up sending a spiritual benefactor to that location to help that individuals. So just one more thing that goes on in these meetings, just so once again we understand that they are constantly trying to help us in every way possible. Two past givers, Clara and Henrique, were now in prayer, surrounded by a halo of light. They were almost separated from their body, and they appeared to be in direct contact with the benefactors present. Naturally, they themselves were not aware of it. So now, in the past giving session, that we get a lot of help from it, because people who are giving passes, past givers, they're not necessarily mediums. We have spiritual magnetism from ourselves that we can donate. And it might be good or it might be bad, depending on how prepared that we are. So past givers have also to prepare themselves. So past givers are now donating good energies for these individuals, so they can at least for a moment or a few moments, feel better, and then begin their moral interchange, the change of their thoughts and their actions. Passes are not going to heal anybody. Let me repeat that. Passes are not going to heal anybody. Even when we go to these mediums who have the capacity of healing our physical body, which is not what takes place here at the passes at the Spiritist Center, at the end of the meeting at the Spiritist Center. Even if we're healed, it's going to be a momentaneous healing. Because until we change ourselves, the sickness is going to be where? It's going to be in our perispirit, which is impressed by our minds. If our mind is sick, our perispirit is sick, and our physical body is sick, we can be healed momentarily, as if we took a pill for a headache that we have. But if we don't change whatever took place for that headache to take place, our headache is going to come back. Alright? So that's what the passes are. The spiritual benefactors help the past givers. If the past giver is prepared to receive help, is in the same wavelength to receive this spiritual help, and then the past givers' energies are expanded, and they can then donate more to the past receivers. In this room, we perceive sublime mental energies from the people who, in love and confidence, use magnetic assistance. So that word, love, that's what passes is, love. Because a lot of us are so much worried about what movements we're going to do, like what techniques we're going to use, and so on and so forth. It's love being transmitted. Clara Henrique's hands radiated luminous energy that gave vigor and well-being to the patients. Magnetic resources applied at close range penetrated the aura of the sick, provoking some sudden changes. Which happens, not all the time, but happens. Fluidified water or magnetized water, same thing. Now, after the passes, Paulus, Ibério, and André Luiz, they left the Spiritist meeting and went about walking in the city, and they saw a bar. So Paulus told the two, let's walk in there because I want to show you a few things. The ambient produced a great feeling of discomfort. Near habitual smokers and drinkers were sad, incarnate spirits in a state of expectancy. Expectancy. Spirits who are expecting something. Some breathed in vapors of the impenitent alcoholics, and others absorbed mouthfuls of smoke. So why do spirits like obsessing other people so they are addicted to drugs, alcohol, smoking, and all of other types of addictions? Why? Because they can sense that addiction. They can feed off that addiction that they have when they were incarnated on earth. So that is exactly what that spirit is doing. That's why some people, the more they drink, the less they really feel. They get to be drunk at a certain point, and that's it. They don't get worse than that. Because the spirit keeps on feeding off those alcoholic energies or fluids. And the more addicted we are, the more they want us to be addicted. Here we perceive vicious entities in perfect communion with these inferior forces that take advantage of people with which they attune. Open parenthesis. There are religions, doctrines, that don't utilize mediumship well. And when we go to these places, we can sit and talk to a medium, and we can make even pacts with spirits. We can ask them to make to help us make more money. We can ask them to make us married, so on and so forth person. We can ask them all kinds of things, and they will help us doing that. They will, because in the spiritual world, there are spirits that are really intelligent, well organized. That reminds us of organized crime on earth. What do we think these people who organize crime here do when they pass on to the other side? What are they now? Angels now because they passed on? Because we like thinking that, right? When someone else has died, oh no, he or she was such a good person. No, they were not. They're still the same person. So there's organized crime on the other side too. And they want things for them. They do. Because they're still living beings who have addictions and they're vicious individuals. So they make pacts with people who are here, incarnated, and want things too. So they make these pacts, but of course they want something in exchange. Much of that here in the US. But when we go to other countries such as Brazil, we see people from these religions or creeds or doctrines. What do they do in like street corners and everything? They do what? Macumba, Kimbanda, Umbanda, whatever the name is. There's all kinds of different creeds, right? They open these bottles of alcoholic beverages, pinga. They kill animals and leave right there in the corner of the street. They do all kinds of crazy, light candles and all these things. Why do they do these things? And when I was a kid, I was already spirit because I was born in a Spiritist family. We used to love when we found these things. We used to kick them and play with them and all this. It was just funny to us. Until one day I told my dad, and he's like, "Don't mess with that." And he explained to me why. From there on, I began to be really, really afraid of it because there are spiritual beings feeding off those things, and if you disrupt that, they might go after you. They might get mad at you. So that's why mediumship is a very serious thing. Very serious thing. And in these religions, we do make pacts with these spirits. And until we pay these pacts, they will not leave us alone. Okay? We often encounter mediums who are controlled and subjugated by somber and delinquent entities. For this reason, to serve requires more than mediumistic faculties. We think that some mediums are so great because they see, they can hear, they can go on TV and tell us what spirit is there, what the spirit is telling us. For this reason, to serve requires more than mediumistic faculties. A mediumistic ability development is not dependent on our moral evolution. It is not dependent. The more morally, spiritually progressed, developed we are, the better mediums we are going to be. And it actually happens automatically. Who was the best medium that has ever lived on earth? Jesus. The Bible is the greatest medium's book that has ever existed. Ever existed. Jesus practiced every type of mediumship we can think of and we can read of the medium's book, Allan Kardec's medium's book. Why was that? Because he was also the most progressed spirit who has ever stepped on here. At the same time, just because we are mediums, it doesn't mean we are progressed spirits. Alright? We must rely on Spiritist and Christian thoughts to control the mediumistic energy and entrust it to spiritual improvement through religious faith, just as we control electricity to benefit human control.
Comfort.
Sorry, comfort. Repeat control twice. So, we must rely on Spiritist and Christian. We must rely on morality, on spiritual morality in progress. That is the only way our mediumship will be well guided. Well guided. There's no other way. And within mediumship, there's several other factors. We picked some other important ones. Animism is a phenomenon in which the medium involuntarily interferes in the mediumistic communication, adding to the spiritual message its own mental impressions. Different from charlatanism. Charlatanism is when somebody fakes mediumship or the mediumistic phenomena, and a lot of people do that, including Spiritist centers, unfortunately. That is why we see in so many places where mediumship is part of the activities, people wanting to control the group by telling the group they are in contact with the spiritual guide. Where do we take that from? From religions we participated in the past. That tells us only this or that individual, this woman or this man is in contact with God. No one else is. Just him or her. Right? So we bring these ideas from past incarnations or participations in other religions, and we bring it to the Spiritist center or to whatever creed we are. And we start saying, I can feel this mentor and the spiritual guide is telling me that we should paint these walls yellow now because the vibration is going to be different. Or we should have 2 more meetings put together. We don't have any workers to start those meetings. But I want to, and my mentor is telling me to. So we are charlatans. We are charlatans. And there's a lot of them out there. They were out there in Kardec's time, and they are all over out there today. Right? Animism is a little bit different. We're not faking it. We just think we just think our intuitions are from a spiritual being, but they're not. They're just part of our own minds, own wishes, our own memories. It's a completely different type of thing. And that is why when we study mediumship, through our mediumistic exercises, we learn to distinguish from our thoughts to the thoughts of the Spirit who is next to us. Psychometry. Type of mediumship where a medium can feel the vibrations and the memories impressed in certain objects. In this book, there's a chapter about that. After they leave the bar, they're walking past a museum. Always asked André Luiz to go into the museum, and he points to this painting. When Always points to this painting, he goes close to it and begins feeling the vibrations of that painting. And he says, this painting, that painting on the wall, or mirror, sorry, that mirror, when Always gets close to it, they start seeing that spirit. And he starts saying the reason why that spirit of that lady is close to that painting, that mirror, is because she is still attached to that mirror, to that object. And she's been there for hundreds of years. Because in her past life, her past incarnation, she lived in Brazil. She was a Portuguese who was in Brazil in the 1500s or so. And she fell in love with another Portuguese man. And they planned to get married. But right after they planned to get married, his father said he had to move back to Portugal and gave him no choice. So he told her he would go to Portugal, and when he was able to get a job and have enough money, he would come back and live with her or bring her back to Portugal. When he gets back to Portugal, what happens? Anybody knows? You guys know. What happens?
He gets married.
He finds another wonderful, beautiful woman and never comes back. But before he went to Portugal, he gave that mirror as a present to her. And as a significance of his affection and his promise. And since then, she's been attached to the mirror. And Aulus felt those vibrations, was able to tell that story by feeling the vibrations from the spirit and from that object. So some mediums have that capacity. Ectoplasmic fluid is utilized in materialization meetings. They still take place today. Used to take place a lot more in the past. William Crookes, if you haven't read his books, read his books. William Crookes, nowadays, if he was alive, he would be like, what's like one of the greatest scientists around? Who is it? Who is it?
Hawkins.
Thank you, Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking.
Right? So he was the Stephen Hawking of his time in England, in the 1800s. When he started knowing about the mediumistic phenomena, he didn't believe in it, he wanted to study it. William Crookes was an unbelievable skeptical, even more than Allan Kardec, who was also, believe it or not, a skeptical scientist. So what did he do? He invited a few people who were already doing these meetings in their homes, but he told them, when you come to my house, because I'm going to do these meetings in my house, I want you to wait outside, in the line outside. Once they got there, he walked out, and one by one he checked all their clothing to see if they were carrying anything, any objects, anything at all. He checked them all. And one by one, he guided them to a room in his house he had already previously prepared for the meeting. Once they started his meetings, he began to do a whole different types of experiences to prove that the phenomena did not exist. And after some time, where he couldn't prove that, a spirit, the spirit of Katie King, began to materialize right before his eyes and everybody else's eyes. And the spirit told him, William, I'm here to prove to you and to work with you so you can show the world that not only the phenomena, but the life after death, the spiritual life, is a reality. So Crookes wrote all of his experiences into one book. After working for 2 years with the materializations of Katie King, where he would take her pulse, because if it's a spirit, it's not supposed to have a pulse, okay? He would bring doctors over, he would dance with the spirit, he would talk to the spirit, and all kinds of things. Now, he would do research or experiences such as he would sit behind a medium who was channeling a spirit, not touch the medium, open up a newspaper of that day right behind him, Crookes, not look at the newspaper, put his finger on a word of the newspaper, which he did not know what the word is, and ask the spirit, what word am I covering? And the spirit would reply. These kinds of experiences, they're all listed in Crookes' experiences, right? Now, this guy, this scientist, is the one that brought us something like the cathode tubes, which brought about the invention of TV, and many other things. He received the Nobel Prize of Science. And after he received that prize, the reporters asked him, did you give up on those notions of spiritual reality, all those crazy things you were talking about? And he told them, no, everything I wrote, I stand behind it even now. So people were like, okay, we're giving a crazy guy this. In order for that to take place, we need the help of spiritual guides, of course. They need to allow us to have that to happen. The recourses of the medium, it has to be an educated medium and has to have a great faculty of materialization. And the fluids of nature, ambient. When we talk about ambient, what do we remember about ambient? What is the mental ambient of this place? What forms the spiritual and mental ambient of this place? We do, whatever we are thinking. So, in order for people to participate in this meeting and make it be a successful meeting, we're going to have people who are prepared to participate in those meetings. That is why it's a very difficult thing to come about and to make it. Materialization. And that was it. Thank you so much for your attention. It's a long book. There's a lot to talk about, but we only had a certain amount of time to do it. So, and I didn't want you guys to go to sleep on me. Yeah.
We have time. Yeah. Anybody has questions?
You don't have to ask anything.
You were mentioning that, if I understood it correctly, that when we get messages, impressions, whatever name you want to label you want to put on it, that they are from spirits, and those messages may be real, but their intentions may not be so pure. Is that correct?
Yes, spirits who are not enlightened may give us messages that are not so great, or messages that will not be so great. They might now look like they're good, but they might not be good. When we study the Medium's book, there is a chapter that talks about the hypocryph messages or spirits, mensagens hipócrifas, which are messages from spirits who are very intelligent and they want to make us believe in what they have to say, but they're not progressed spirits. So by confusing us, they make us think it's something good to follow. And Kardec examines in the Medium's book several of those messages and points out the difference between those messages and messages from spiritual guides. And that is why we have to be very careful about what we read, especially in literature that is called the Spiritist literature. Because there's a whole bunch of mediums out there thinking they are channeling books that are from spiritual guides, but they are not. And if you read the books and compare to that, what we talked about in the Spirit's book, the third part of the Spirit's book, the moral laws, if you compare, you will see that those are hypocryph messages, and they're not real Spiritist messages or Christian messages full of morality.
So we have to be real careful.
Real careful with everything we read. It's not a problem to read anything that we want, as long as we have the ability to distinguish. Allan Kardec, he believed so much in the Spiritist literature that in the Parisian Spiritist Society, he had a whole bunch of books that talked bad about Spiritism, that were against Spiritism. Now, let's look at what we're talking about before I said that. These were books who were openly against Spiritism. These were not books that told us they were Spiritist books and distorted Spiritism. See, that's where the problem is. is books and people who call themselves spiritists, or spiritist centers that are not spiritists, but they call themselves spiritists. If we Google Espiritismo in Brazil, Google Brazil, we're gonna find all kinds of places that have nothing to do with spiritism. They're from Macumba, Umbanda, and Candomblé, but they call, the actual sign on their door is Espírita. And that's what we have to watch out for. That Kardec was afraid of. That's why he dedicated a whole chapter in the Medium's book for that.
I guess you can't confuse mediumship with spiritism. Mediumship can happen to anybody.
It always
Even people
existed.
that don't believe in anything, right? Always
Yeah,
exists.
it's a law. It's a law of the universe. It's a law of the physical world, and it always existed. It has always been practiced. We practice even without wanting to practice. Everybody has it at some degree, and it's like gravity. Even if you don't like it, it's there, and it's not pulling. I was gonna say, the notion of pulling, gravity doesn't pull us down; it presses us down, right? Anyways, okay. Lots to think about. Thank you.
We thank Mauricio. There's a lot there to learn. Obviously, it's very deep, right? The subject. It's new for some of us here. This is something we have been studying for a long time, and that's why the Spiritist group is here, for us to study together, learn about so many other things, and especially to be able to put in practice doing good, right? This is one aspect of Spiritism. Let's not forget that it is just one aspect. We talk about mediumship, which is known, the name, but not really what it is. And that was the purpose, that we start really paying attention and understand when people say things to us about mediumship, or especially the confusion, right? Sometimes people, because they see something, or because sometimes they're just disturbed. They are obsessed. They're, with problems. Let's not jump into the conclusion that they're mediums. They should be developing mediumship. There's a gap there sometimes into this reality of mediumship. So it is a vast field of learning. It's not only, let's not take this so lightly. So today was a good beginning for some. Some of us have been studying for years and years. We'll continue studying always, because this is part of a process combined with our moral side, the evolution, and how to use it to get to a point where this is just one more attribute of ourselves as we evolve, and we're able really to use that in a very good way. And the good news also is that we talked a lot about those suffering spirits. I was thinking, as Mauricio was mentioning that, how wonderful it is to get those messages from spirits, sometimes that are able to send a little note. Doesn't happen very often, not always, but we know, and for those of you talking about movies, some movies that what was the movie that we watched that had the mothers of Chico? When mothers that had been separate from their children through this carnation, but they died in this life, and the mothers were really suffering, mothers here, I mean. And then through messages from these children, from the other side of life, through mediumship. So there is a lot of this other side also, that love can come to us, showing that life continues in different ways, proves that we receive, and that some of us would love to receive sometimes, and we hope. But hopefully one day we'll be closer to this spirituality in a way that we can receive more easily those messages or those certainties. So let's really work on our moral side to get there and to be able to really just be parts of our lives. This life and death become just a more natural thing for us instead of being attached to, you know, people and things and situations that keep us mentally stuck. So let's get rid of this and work our inner transformation. I think that's a good message to all of us always in this kinds of talks and makes us remember. So we will close now with our prayer. Do you want to do the invitation for after the prayer? After. Okay, so we'll close this. And just please don't go anywhere for 2 seconds. We have something else Mauricio wants to tell us. And then afterwards we'll be able to have some coffee, some tea, some cake, good talking. We have more time to be around, okay? And work on other parts of Spiritism, which is this fraternal side of it that makes us feel so good. So.